So today's topic is imported inflation versus food inflation. We all know that there are more than 17, 20, more than 20, 21 types of inflation prevailing in our country, in other countries. And inflation is one of the important topics in any of the competitive examination. So imported inflation versus food inflation in India. We all know that imported inflation is related to price rise, sudden price rise in crude oil and volatility in food prices pose credible threat to the headline inflation in India. Headline inflation means food inflation. Headline inflation in India consists of food inflation and other related inflation which we discuss. So we all know that in our country, the consumer expenditure on goods and services in the economy as a result of persistent and sticky inflation. There is a decline. There is continuous decline in the share of private final consumption expenditure, which was 6.77 in 2022-23. Now it has reduced to 4.02% in 2020-24. It means the final private consumption demand in India is decreasing in most of the things. And therefore, this continuous fall in the share of private consumption in the GDP is visible not only in the yearly growth trends, but also in the trends of quarterly growth year-to-year comparison basis. There is growth in PFCF along with the continuous decline in the share of PFCF in rising GDP indicate fall in the consumer expenditure on goods and services in the economy of India as a result of persistent and sticky inflation declining. This is an alarming factor that in the market goods are there, but Indians are not going to the market to buy things in a large amount. So some essential commodities are bought, but not increase in private consumption. And this is a very important point in economics, that if the economy is really rising, if economy is really robust, then everyone should have capacity to buy anything which is for his uses. And what is found in India? Most of the economists are silent. Some of them are speaking about it, but very slowly. There is continuous fall in the share of private consumption in the GDP. All poor and lower income group people are in this group. Lower income, lower middle class, all are in this group. Very large number. That is 80 crore plus. They are having a continuous fall in the share of private consumption in the GDP is not only visible, not only in the yearly growth trend, but also in the trend of quarterly growth on year-to-year basis. Tepid growth in PFCE along with continuous decline. There is increase in private consumption. There is increase in private final consumption expenditure, which is increasing at the rate of 6.77 in last year, 2023. 2024, it has declined to 4.02%. So there is double side uh, adverse effect that private consumption expenditure is falling, and at the same time share of private consumption, private final consumption expenditure is also declining, indicate that the consumer expenditure of goods and services in the economy as a result of persistent and sticky inflation. So food inflation has still remained at an elevated level of 8.69% in May 2024 as compared to 8.70% in 24 in May compared to 8.70 in April. April 2024 in India. The rise in food inflation was led by an increase in the increase in the inflation rate of inflation rate of vegetable 27.33 27.33%, followed by by inflation rate of pulses and products. 17.34%. And finally, inflation rate of cereal and product. Product 8.69% among others. Factors such as intense heat wave, heat waves, vagaries of monsoon, crop damage, uncertainty in the international commodity prices, international commodity prices, may aggravate, may aggravate the food inflation food in food inflation situation situation going ahead. The private final consumption demand is measured by the by the private consumption expenditure. Consumption, private consumption, private measured by private final, measured by private final, private final consumption expenditure. Consumption expenditure. BPSC which is expected to decline from 6.77% in 2022-23 to 4.02% in 2023-24 on an annual basis. Annual basis as per public expenditure. Notably, there has been a continuous decline, notably there has been a continuous decline in the share in the share decline in the share of BPSCE in the overall in the overall GDP from 58.1% in 2021 to 22 to 58% in 2020 21 22 22 23 and 55.8% in 2023 24. The continuous fall in the share of private consumption, share of private consumption in the GDP in the GDP is visible not only in the yearly growth in the yearly growth, but also in the in the trend of quarterly growth quarterly growth on a year Y YOY basis. Tepid growth in PFCE, private final consumption expenditure, along with a continuous decline, a continuous 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 decline in the share of PFCE in rising GDP of India indicate fall in the consumer expend expenditure on goods and services in the economy. In the economy as a result of as a result of persistent and sticky inflation. Now, lastly, what we say that many factors contribute to this food inflation, vegetable inflation, inflation, uh, pulse and product inflation, cereal and product inflation, all will affect food inflation. Many factors such as intense heat waves, vagaries of monsoon, crop damage, uncertainties in the international commodity prices may aggravate the food inflation situation going ahead. In this context, it is important to note that the adoption of easy and accommodative monetary and fiscal policies has the potential to generate aggregate demand and accelerate economic growth. However, the threat of inflation looms large if there is no commensurate increase in the aggregate supply in the economy, which is necessary to maintain the equilibrium. This is particularly significant as the economy is experiencing this dwindling situations. Lastly, it is important to note that the adoption of easy and accommodative accommodative easy and accommodative monetary or fiscal policy fiscal policies has the potential, has the potential to generate aggregate demand, aggregate demand and accelerate economic growth. Accelerate economic growth. However, threat of inflation looms large if there is no commensurate commensurate increase in the aggregate supply in the aggregate supply in the economy, which is necessary to maintain to maintain necessary to maintain the economy. This is particularly significant as the economy of India desired goal attain third position in developed third position in the developed country third position in the developed country race. Desired goal to attain third position. Here we come to the conclusion that our topic was food inflation. Food inflation imported inflation versus food inflation in India. We have examined imported inflation that is caused by import exceeds export. Last 70 years, very few years are located when export is greater than import in India. Therefore, India was considered to be chronic disequilibrium in the balance of payment. And we were always desiring IMF loan and with a high interest in order to correct the disequilibrium, the balance of payment. I have written somewhere in this topic or earlier that in 1991, those students who were not at that time in college, they think that Indian economy was unable to pay $77 billion bond, India bond purchased by foreigners, foreign investors. Their maturity came in 1991, and in January, we have to manage $77 billion to pay India bond matured at that time. But in India, there was only $1 billion. That is why P.V. Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Manmohan Singh at that time, P.V. Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister as well as Industry Minister. So IMF pressed that IMF will not give you loan. Today, this pressure is faced by Pakistan. Pakistan is begging ball, but not getting dollar in that begging ball. At that time, India was considered to be a country having begging ball. And it was Narasimha Rao, Sri Narasimha Rao, late Narasimha Rao, highly educated person. He understood the thing, and Manmohan Singh was at that time vocal because he was finance minister. He followed the tax reforms followed in USA, that tax rate should be cut. It will increase the receipt of the taxes, and this will lead to tax buoyancy in the world, in the country at large. Tax buoyancy means you are getting 100% tax payment, and it exceeds your desire. So much amount of tax is collected, and that is Laffer's curve. In any interview, you will be asked, what is Laffer's curve? Laffer's curve is a curve established by Professor Laffer, American economist. Professor Laffer says that if tax rate is lowered, there will be more tax payment. Tax payment default will be zero. People will be ready to pay if the rate is low. So he has drawn a curve like inverted U shape. And then the center is the highest peak of the U shape. That is highest, but that will be lowest in terms of collection of the fund. So if tax is lowered from this Laffer curve, you will find out tax return will come. There is a single point where there is maximum tax return. That rate is neither lower nor higher in between. So Laffer curve and Laffer thesis, it was actually Professor Laffer's thesis to get PhD. And this many Nobel laureate in economics, their PhD thesis becomes the matter of Nobel Prize. I have written about many of them in my YouTube channel, Dr. P.C. Verma Economics YouTube channel, Nobel Prize winners' contributions. You can find out there. So Laffer's curve forced Manmohan Singh to decrease tax rate. You will surprise that during Indira Gandhi regime in our country, there were 39 slabs. Nowadays, there are 3 slabs. Lower slab, middle slab, and higher slab. And thereafter, tax rate becomes a horizontal line. Whether you have crore, we have 10 crore, arab, kharab, whatever, tax rate will be horizontal after a limit of 20 lakh per year. Therefore, income tax, it was thought earlier that income tax is progressive. But nowadays, income tax is not progressive. Income tax is progressive, and after a time it becomes proportional. So curve will be going upward and then become finally flat. Flat tax rate. It was also discovered by some Nobel Prize winner economist. Tax rate should be flat after some time. This will increase total tax collection. And also it will curtail expenditure. Therefore, imported inflation is related to the inflation created by price rise of international commodities and oil, petrol, other things which we buy international market. So imported inflation is in terms of sudden rise in international crude oil prices and volatility in the food prices will pose to be credible threat to the headline inflation in India. When in interview asked what is headline inflation is food inflation, vegetable inflation, pulses inflation. So headline inflation data is released by MOSPI Government of India, and food inflation has still remained at elevated level of 8.69% in May 2024. Likewise, there is a rise in food inflation led by increase in vegetable inflation, followed by increase in pulse product inflation, and followed by cereal inflation rate. All these make things so complex that food inflation may disturb our rate of economic growth and stability in the sense equilibrium. There is always adjustment between demand and supply. Demand and supply is the basic thing in the economy for inflation. If demand for any commodity is high and there is less supply, price will rise. If supply is more but demand is less, then it will lead to disinflation. So economy is always following the terms of vagaries of inflation and fluctuations and volatility in terms of deflation, depression. You have to make a balance and get an equilibrium. And for that, you have to manage the stability and economic growth, stability in food inflation, stability in imported inflation, and thereby you try to improve the share of people in purchase expenditure out of GDP. People expenditure share in the GDP is also declining. So it is now required to think about the regular employment, a stable employment, proper employment policy, proper food policy, proper control and suggestions in the agriculture sector, in the service sector, in the industrial sector, in the tertiary sector. Overall management is required to maintain a stability in the price level, to maintain a stable inflation, mild inflation. 4% inflation is acceptable. 4% is very important percentage. 4% inflation, 4% supply of money, 4% unemployment, all these are acceptable. Unemployment cannot be zero. There may be frictional unemployment. There may be switch. IITian switch from one company to another company, and 3 months he may be unemployed. That 3 months unemployment of IITian by switching from one country to another country, one company to another company, this is called frictional unemployment. This is not a problem. This is a this is the mechanism of shifting from one job to another job. So for 4% supply of money will not aggravate inflation. So what is the golden rate of supply of money? 4%. What is the golden rate of inflation? 4%. What is the golden rate of supply of money? 4%. How much unemployment is not a problem? 4%. Because that is frictional unemployment. It will be solved automatically. So these are the things we have discussed. Now, at last, I had shown you that 17 type of inflation. So gradually I am completing different types, and you must consult that Dr. P.C. Verma economist channel and find out different inflation there, and complete your knowledge about inflation. There is a certain question from inflation. And lastly, like it, subscribe it, share it to the friends. Some of my students in Delhi, they are sharing to different students, and they suggested me that you use Telegram. So, no, I have no time to use Telegram. You share your friends. This is open for all to read, and easily, if you like it, then you will imbibe it. You will make things yours. You will discuss among your friends. This will give you inner strength to speak anything about inflation. This will be all by the grace of God, which has given to me, and I distribute to you. Like it, subscribe it, and comment it in one line at least. You comment it. Thank you very much.